Hello and welcome to another episode of Lead with Curiosity. My name is Anthony, and as always, I will be your host. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Lambden, Director of Business Development at Cambridge Spark. They specialise in training and apprentices, particularly in the field of AI and data. So many myths around apprentices, what age should they be and how do apprentices work? So really looking forward to getting stuck into that and getting some practical tips of how to work with apprenticeships and really make them work for you and your business. So let's get started. Enjoy the episode. Richard, firstly, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure actually to be having a conversation with you in a studio and not on a train to London that leaves at some unearthly hour, which is where you and I have had many of our conversations over the years. So really, really pleased to invite you to the pod. Firstly, I guess just a bit of background to yourself. You work with apprenticeships, but I know you've obviously done other things in the past. So do you mind just sharing a high level overview of your background and what you've done up until now, if that's all right?
Absolutely, and many thanks for the invite, Anthony. It is, as I say, good to have an opportunity for a conversation. So, I guess I spent 30 years in the kind of talent development, recruitment, training market. About half of that time, you and I have a bit of a shared history in our time at Reed, which I think shaped my sales career in many ways. I'm sure it did you as well. But the last, since 2010, so what's that, 16 years, I've been in the apprenticeship education training space, which I absolutely love. It's great to be able to kind of give back to society and help people kind of develop their careers. And I specifically have been in sales. So I run a sales team currently for a company called Cambridge Spark, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Well, let's talk about Cambridge Spark. Tell us a little bit more about Cambridge Spark.
Yeah, so the company's been going for about 10. We actually have our 10th year anniversary next week. We have a
congratulations.
summer party back in my home county of Buckinghamshire. But the organisation was set up really to be the best that we can be in the data and AI space, which obviously is very relevant at the moment. We do a mixture of training through the apprenticeship funding, so the government apprenticeship scheme, but we also do a lot of kind of short course bespoke training. So very much like you do in your business in terms of kind of coaching and training people, obviously in sales and leadership management. We do it in kind of AI and data, anything from like a 1 hour masterclass through to kind of three month structured program. So, I mean, I started 4.5 years ago, and I think there was about 30 odd of us when I joined. We're now over 200. You can see how it's kind of grown rapidly. But I think the owner has made a very sensible decision for us to try and stay in our lane, as it won't be the best that we can be in our particular field. So not try and, do too many different programs, but literally have a very kind of succinct group of programs that we offer. But be brilliant at them as best as we can, can in terms of delivering service.
Okay. And as you say, AI and data is obviously a very hot topic right now, but you started 10 years ago. So was it always AI and data? Was that incredible foresight or?
No, it was data. So Raoul, who is our founder, did a PhD at, so the story goes, did his PhD at Cambridge University. And he used to, I think probably to get a bit of money on the side, used to teach the undergraduates, and he subsequently written books about Java and coding languages and so on and so forth. And back in the day, he would be setting the students some work. They would be submitting it to him over an email, and he would have to go and print out their lines of code. And he said, this is ridiculous. There must be a better way to do that. So as part of his PhD, he actually developed what's turned into our learner management system. It's called Educate.ai. Which is basically a fantastic piece of kit where people can, in a safe environment, like a safe simulated environment, they can build their lines of code, they can practice, they can submit it to the system, they kind of get instantaneous feedback. So actually, when the company started, it was actually teaching individuals how to code.
Okay.
Yeah, so data. Yeah. Obviously, AI has become more and more, in all of our consciousness, I guess, since the kind of Gen AI tools came out a few years ago. But of course, AI has been around for a long time. It's no surprise that, the programs that you get directed to on Netflix are the ones that you like, or the restaurants when you're in a town that you kind of get directed to go to ones that you kind of like, because AI, when you book insurance, has been in the background, hasn't it? The algorithms of, of your quotes. But so I think, yes, I'm sure there was a degree of foresight within it. But initially it was very data focused. It's really only the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years since I kind of started that there's been more and more focus on AI as people have needed to get up to speed with it.
And are there certain demographics? I want to get into your views on apprenticeships and the myths around apprenticeships and how that's thankfully changing
Yeah.
dramatically, and rightly so. But just in terms of the demographics for people listening, is there a typical age group, or can people do apprenticeships at any age? Or
There is a minimum age. You can't start until you've kind of finished. You become 16 or when you've kind of left school. But we have people in their 60s doing apprenticeships. There is no upper limit. You can start an apprenticeship whenever you want, but you do need to be 16 and you do need to be in employment. Yeah. I mean, you can obviously apply for a job and get a new opportunity, but you do have to be in employment. When I started 16 years ago, they were called frameworks. And without being disrespectful, they were a little bit more academic. Typically as a provider, we get given an allocation by the Skills Funding Agency. We would go as a sales team, knock on doors literally,
yeah,
and encourage organisations to hire an apprentice, and we would train them. But typically what was happening in those scenarios, so they were about a year in length, sometimes a little bit longer depending on the level. But organisations didn't necessarily then keep the young person on, as they were typically 16 to 18-year-olds kind of leaving college, a little bit of 19 to 23. But in 2015-16, something called Trailblazer Groups got formed, which effectively changed frameworks into what's become standards. And I like to think them as a kite mark, Anthony.
okay,
If you've completed, in our case, a data analyst apprenticeship, that is a portable currency that if you move employer, you can say to your next employer, look, I've been trained to a standard, I've met a standard,
mm.
and I will obviously be able to do great work for you. And what happened when I think it was John Major brought in the apprenticeship levy in 2017 is that employers got taxed. And the thinking behind that was, UK PLC were seen to be lagging in the G7 and other countries in terms of productivity, in terms of training. And it was an attempt to force, in inverted commas, organizations to invest in training in their organizations, because they basically get taxed on one hand if they've got a payroll of 3 million or more a year, but on the other hand, the government gives it back to them in the form of this apprenticeship levy to spend on apprenticeship training. And what happened then was that organizations were, yes, they still hire young people, and we can get into that because I
Mm.
think there is some challenges around that. If you look at the press and the recent
Yep.
Alan Milburn report that's all over the press today, but what's tended to happen is organisations have used it more as a workforce development tool. So you talked about the myths of apprenticeships,
Mm.
and therefore, when I, perhaps when I was growing up, it was the plumber and the,
That's right.
and the mechanic and my wife did a hairdressing apprenticeship. My son did apprenticeship here at Bloxham Mill with Serco. So, they're very much seen as entry-level type opportunities. But now they're very much seen as closing skill gaps. So you could have somebody who's been to university, got a degree, in mathematics and geography, so they've kind of got that STEM subject right side brain, but actually they've never been trained in data analytics. They've got the aptitude for it, but it's a new skill or a new requirement in their job role. Let's talk about AI.
Yeah.
All of us need to be trained in that, let's be honest.
Exactly.
So hence you can be anybody at any age, at any stage in your career. And it really kind of supports that, lofty ambition, which I don't think we're quite there yet, about that kind of lifelong learning attitude that people should have in their career. Sorry, long-winded answer.
No, it's a great response, and I think it is super topical. It's refreshing to hear you say that apprenticeships are not just perceived to be for young people that don't go to university. And I think, speaking to people of that demographic, a lot of people are now saying they don't necessarily want to go down the university route because of associations with debt, and it's not going to guarantee you a job. So it's good to see that it's much broader and younger people have more choices available. I'm interested, you obviously work with organizations that take on apprentices. From your experience, for anybody listening that's thinking, yeah, actually we would be interested in taking on an apprentice, whether it's AI data or any other discipline, what is it that the best employers do well to get the best out of that relationship two-way? Because there has to be benefits for both parties, right?
Yeah. I mean, great question. There are about 700 different standards now, by the way. You can pretty much do any profession through an apprenticeship, whether it be accountancy, whether it be nursing, whether it be HR, in our case, technical. So there's a huge range of opportunities. First thing I would encourage any employer to do is to partner with a reputable provider, because a good quality provider will help the employer. They'll help them shape the job description. They'll help them shape the duties that somebody should do if they're looking to hire somebody. But I always say, and I say this when I talk to learners, I say this when I talk to employers, the best schemed programs, if I can call them that, are where the learner, the line manager, and us as a training provider are all on the same page. So I think there is a bit of a misconception sometimes that, perhaps we can get onto this as a separate topic, but apprenticeships are administratively burdensome for organisations, and there's an element of truth in that. But essentially, the modern apprenticeship is about the learner, their employee, applying the learning through real work-based projects. So they should derive not just upskilling the individual, but there should be a return on investment for the organisation as well, through demonstrable benefits from the projects that they're doing. Real projects. It's not theory anymore. It has to be practical. That's how they kind of get assessed. So I always say to the line manager, just be a great line manager. I mean, you spend a lot of time coaching managers. I know, you're brilliant at kind of developing organizations and their leadership strategy. I'd like to think any good manager is going to show interest in their employee. So when you're having your normal one-to-one, whether that be weekly, monthly, whatever it is, just ask them how the apprenticeship's going. How can I help you improve, develop your apprenticeship, apply the learning that you're getting from the training provider into real, turning that theory into practical application. And that's where the good employers kind of do well. There are other things that, you allow me to kind of name drop. We work with organisations like Pearson, who I've worked with both at Cambridge Spark and on my previous training provider, and they do things like award ceremonies. When we went to university, you and I did a graduation, didn't we?
Right.
And we threw the mortar in the air and did all the kind of typical things. Why should you not celebrate the success of apprentices? I mean, we at Cambridge Spark have our own apprenticeship. Our next one actually is coming up at the Guildhall in London on the 26th of June. But, organisations like Pearson will do their own celebrations. They'll also give the apprentices the opportunity to showcase what they're doing. It might be, I don't know, a lunch and learn, or they might get to present to the CEO or have a bit of a dragon's den or that kind of thing, and that's lovely. I love that. And that's why I do this job. It's not, yes, obviously I enjoy sales, but ultimately seeing that person, particularly if they're a younger person, but seeing that person kind of really add value to their organisation is so rewarding.
Which again is also reflects well on the organisation as well, right?
Of course it does. And to be honest, if if you were looking these days to go and get an opportunity with organisation, and you saw that they invested in training, whether it be through an organisation like yours or through apprenticeships, surely as a potential employer, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it? In terms of that kind of corporate social responsibility,
I completely agree.
to use the jargon.
What tips would you give to anybody looking for a apprenticeship and training provider?
Well, I mean, when I started, there used to be a National Apprenticeship Service that were very good at advertising. Sadly, I think as budgets get cut, they're not as, you don't see it on the telly and in the news, perhaps apart from National Apprenticeship Week, which is typically in kind of February. There is, however, if you can find it as part of the kind of Direct Gov website, there is lots of information about providers. So in the public domain, all of the organisations will have what's called their quality achievement rates, so their success rates, so how many people pass, what grades they get. You can get a pass merit distinction. And indeed, the employers and learners are able to provide feedback. So the first thing I would encourage any employer to do is to, if they're looking to hire, let's say, an HR apprentice, go onto the relevant government portal, pull up the standard, pull up the providers that are approved to deliver it, because we will have to go through an approval process to deliver these apprenticeships, and obviously quality and financial, regularity, all that kind of stuff is measured, and then speak to 2 or 3 providers, because much like any relationship, you want it to be a partnership. You want to think that if it's lovely when things go well, but what happens when things don't go quite so well? Do you feel you can have an honest conversation with that training provider and obviously get rectified, whatever it might be that you're looking to do? So yeah, go onto the website, select 2 or 3 providers, do a bit of a beauty parade, feel that you've found a partner you can kind of work with, and then work with them around the program and the training and the support mechanism they're going to get. And then back to my earlier point, make sure that it's not just the individual learner that's bought in, but the line manager understands the opportunity and the benefits and is supportive, and then the program should go really well.
So, as you should anyway, but you're really saying a line manager should treat an apprentice as you would do any other member of the team that you invite. You'd onboard them, you train them, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, I'm going back to our days at Reed. I can remember, I've never been able to do this, by the way, but I remember, I think it was the lady that managed our Norwich office, had one of the most successful track records in developing new members of staff. And she got asked either by James or I suspect, in terms of why you were so successful. And she said, well, when somebody starts, I give 90% of my time to that person. Hands up, I've never been able to get to 90% when I have a new starter. But exactly, show interest, show curiosity, support them. If they're doing great work, promote them around the organisation. But most importantly, from our perspective, there is, like any qualification, there are what's called occupational duties or competencies we have to make sure the individual learns. So, give that new person the tasks, the projects, the opportunities to demonstrate and showcase their talents. And, one of the things I think that sometimes are forgotten about with apprenticeships, Anthony, is that it's not just the individual that benefits, but the line manager benefits as well. I've seen situations where the line managers kind of come to life because they love imparting their skills and knowledge, and they kind of are able to do that through the new member of staff, or indeed even if it's an existing member of staff, they're able to see that person kind of flourish. And of course, the theory is you should then in turn be able to perhaps delegate some of the things that you've been able to do to grow that individual, which of course then should free up more of your time to do the interesting, strategic, the stuff that you've wanted to do but you've not had the time to do because you've been in the weeds. And I think that should not be underplayed. It is a huge benefit.
More. I could not agree more. I was in London just yesterday with running a line management program, and exactly that. There was a gentleman on that workshop who has 2 apprenticeships actually, and as his words, not mine. I'm like a proud parent.
Yeah,
a bit of a trailblazer. Yeah. But that particular organisation, I think this is the 3rd rotation now that they've gone through, and the other thing I would say is all of those apprentices from the 3 years back, they're all still with the organisation doing great things. So it's not just, as you said earlier, just quick tick a box and away you go. There's some longevity to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I can't remember the bang up to date stats, but it's something like somewhere between 40 and 50% of the apprentices that we train within about, before the end of their apprenticeship, have either had a promotion, they've taken more responsibility, they've had a pay rise. The power of them is transformational in terms of the organisation, and to say not just for the individual, but and let's be honest, the economy is kind of bumping a little bit along the bottom. Growth isn't where we would all want it to kind of be. So, if you've invested in somebody and they're good, would you not want to keep them? Would you not want to train them? Would you not want to develop them and stay in your organisation? And if they're your values and culture. An apprentice can play a part in that. They're not the only solution, obviously, but they can play a part in that, in my opinion.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, I'm interested in the training side of things. Yep. And I don't know if this is unique to Cambridge Spark or this is a broader thing, but when we were chatting before, you talked about this kind of blend of learning approach. So it's not just classroom, it's kind of hands-on as well.
Yeah.
Talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. We like to talk about kind of a tripartite model. I mean, we know better than I. We all learn in different ways, okay? One size doesn't fit all in terms of training. So our model is a combination of live workshops, training sessions, which are typically half day for the apprenticeships. So, something like a 9:30 to 1 or 1 to 4:30. And for us, they're always on the same time on the same day throughout their apprenticeships. They've kind of got that certainty and consistency. And we have 2 models. We either do what we call an open model, where there might be 1s and 2s from all sorts of different organizations. You get that value of shared ideas from different industry sectors and peer-to-peer learning. We do a closed model that might be specific for an organization. So we might focus on a particular tool or use their language in terms of kind of training. And those are obviously taught by our subject matter experts, mixture of our faculty of trainers and tutors, but they're very practical. Gone are the days of, death by PowerPoint. You're sat in a, I think back
Thank goodness.
Think back to my kind of university days where you're literally in lecture halls with hundreds of people on a tiny little screen and you're trying to keep up with what the person's kind of teaching you. we're very lucky, as I said earlier. Raoul, our founder, built this learner management system that's morphed into Educate.ai. So our learners will, be doing live coding or building a workflow, whatever it might be, live in our system on a practical basis. So that's kind of the live environment, if you will. And predominantly, I say live, it's predominantly over Microsoft Teams these days, but we do some in-person kind of training. COVID kind of put pay to a lot of the face-to-face training, I know, and although I know you do a lot of training face-to-face still. Secondly, we then in the platform give them what we call assignments. Think of it as homework. Yeah. To get good at any skill, you have to practice it. You and I have a shared love of sport. You used to coach football. I used to coach cricket here in Banbury. And obviously, just because you're teaching a kid how to kick a ball, or in my case, play a cricket shot or catch a ball, they do it once. They don't suddenly become brilliant. You have to do that, muscle memory, all the kind of stuff. Exactly the same with us. Yeah. So we give them assignments after the workshops to practice. That's kind of the self-study. They do have a little bit of pre-study as well before the workshops. But we've particularly found since the days we've gone remote, as opposed to the face-to-face situation, that if they walk into the session having some idea what's going to be covered, they kind of get more out of it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the learning bit, combination of the workshops and then this practical self-study.
And forgive me ignorance, the workshops, do they take place in your offices?
No, they're over Microsoft Teams.
Right. Okay.
If we do have a training center in King's Cross, which we occasionally use, but most people it's all remote, or we go to their premises if they want a closed cohort and they want an in-person session. So that's the learning bit. The real value, of course, is the application. These work-based projects I talked about, where they've taken the theory and they've applied it in, building a report if it's data analytics, or building a workflow if it's AI, or building a machine learning model if it's the really advanced kind of AI engineer program. And then they get supported by 2 individuals at Cambridge Spot. And I think we're still pretty unique in regards to this. And one of the reasons I think, we're so successful in getting merit and distinction grades for our learners, we're currently running at over 70% for over 2,000 people that have achieved through us over the years. One of those is also a technical person. We call them a mentor, so either a data or an AI mentor. And their job is to help the learner apply the learning in the way that they need it to be applied, because clearly the problems, because that's what's effectively what you're doing, is that you're solving business problems, aren't you? The problems that somebody, I don't know, in an NHS trust is facing is going to be very different from somebody in a retail store or a high street bank or whatever it might be. So the skill of the mentor, okay, what's the business problem you're trying to challenge? What's the project you want to do? Let me help you apply the learning. Let me help you build this kind of what's called a portfolio of evidence that they ultimately get assessed on. But we also give them what we call a learner success coach, who plays much more to your strengths in terms of those coaching and mentoring skills from that perspective. So they're not technical, but they're there. Perhaps you talked earlier about any age. Yeah. Somebody in their 40s, 50s, my age, in their 60s, might have not done any structured learning for some time.
Right.
Yeah. So you want that support and guidance, that little bit of pastoral care, that arm around the shoulder, that bit of motivation. I remember when I was at Reed, I did my CIPD through that Reed sponsored. And I remember I started in October, full of excitement, first quarter. Then Christmas happened. I had young kids at the time. January came round. It was a real struggle to get going again, Anthony. It would have been lovely if there'd been somebody pushing me, supporting me, encouraging me. That's kind of, I'm being a bit simplistic, but that's kind of what our learner success coaches do. They help them with learning techniques. They do interact with the line manager and make sure, keep the line managers honest in terms of making sure they kind of give them relevant tasks, but they're not there to technically help them. They're there to coach them and guide them through the program. And that kind of interplay of the live sessions, the 2 supportive people in terms of the coach and the mentor, and then our fabulous platform that has been built and developed over the years, is that kind of tripartite approach that we try and take to give everybody around it. And I mean, within the system, there's quizzes, there's YouTube videos, there's all the recordings of the sessions, there's white papers, there's further reading, etc., that just adds that kind of icing, tops the icing on the cake as well.
And I guess the irony is that with it being AI and data, AI is obviously going to support that and make that learning more
I mean,
interactive.
We have very deliberately, there are some providers out there that have almost gone to AI doing everything in terms of the feedback. And our system has AI built into it, and there is a chatbot on there, and they can interrogate the system and research and all the rest of it. But we very deliberately said at the end of the day, we want to give that human support, that human interaction. That's what makes us special, rather than going onto YouTube, or there's some great online providers like Udemy and Coursera where you could just go and teach yourself. And that works for some people and fabulous organizations. But at the end of the day, what we do is provide that guided learning, that guided support to help people kind of really apply it.
I think that support is key. I was chuckling when you were talking about your CIPD. I did the same thing, and I remember the learning materials, i.e. books, arriving in a
Oh, Christ, they were huge
delivery
boxes.
van. And the chap that delivered the van, he obviously saw my face. I was practically in tears. And he said, "Wait till you see the other load." And I started laughing, thinking he was joking. And he wasn't. The second lot of boxes came through were even bigger. And
I
as you
think they're
say,
still in my
having
loft, Anthony. I think they're still up in my loft.
and having someone alongside to support you is so key. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's been really interesting to hear about that. For anybody that's thinking specifically around AI and data and want to learn more about Cambridge Sparks, how do they find out more about you? What's the best place to go to look
I
you
guess
up?
our website, so cambridgespark.com. Our founder has his own podcast, so look out for. There's a data and AI podcast. In fact, we have two now. We have a kind of a chief AI officer, and he has a more technical one that's inside the algorithm. But Rao does a brilliant podcast. We just chats to people in set up teams or of run transformation projects or have adopted AI, and they share their experiences, good and bad, because not everything goes well, of course, and kind of share those learns. So do look out for those podcasts. But yeah, probably the most obvious thing is to go to cambridgesmart.com.
Perfect. We'll make sure
delighted.
there's a link to that in the show
thank you,
notes
that's
as
kind.
well. Superb. So my last question is, as you know, we ask all our guests the same question. The pod is called Lead with Curiosity. So my question to you is, what are you curious about learning or doing next?
Yeah, I can answer that in two. I actually brought the book with me. I mean, we're very fortunate at Cambridge Spark that we also kind of get trained, and we have a people managers course, which again I'm going on next Thursday. And the book we've been reading is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a pretty well familiar book that I think is into its about 20th edition. So that's been great. But in terms of the AI space, I guess a few years ago, we all suddenly got given these tools called ChatGPT and and Copilot and Claude and all these other things that kind of came out, and they've almost a bit like, Google and these other search engines. We all just kind of just became mainstream and the norm. But the next thing that I'm really curious about is how agents can actually play a part now. I think there's a good and bad of that, because again, going back to Alan Milburn's report today, there is a bit of a worry. I think that where are those entry level jobs going to be if everything gets automated and agents do all of that kind of routine tasks for us. But I do think they've got a great part to play in terms of transforming. I'd love to know, I'm at the back end of my career, but for people, your children are about to kind of not that long away will be entering their professional careers, won't they? So how will their world look in 10 years' time in terms of how AI is going to shape the way that they do? So, yeah, I'm still curious about that. And if there's anybody out there that is about to enter the market, then don't just make yourself digitally savvy these days. Really make sure you embrace what AI can do for you, because I'm a strong believer that AI won't necessarily replace people's jobs. I think that'll change people's jobs, but if you haven't kind of kept up, somebody who is a bit more AI savvy might be in a better place to kind of take your job or develop their career kind of quicker than you. So yeah, stay curious around AI and see what agents can do in terms of improving our world.
Great advice, and I think a great place to finish. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Great to be here.
Thanks, Richard. So my thanks as always to Richard for his time. As I mentioned in the pod, it was quite a pleasure to be sitting in the studio rather than on a hot, sweaty train on a Tuesday morning. Lots to take away. I think one of the things that really struck me about apprentices is the fact that it isn't just for school or college leavers. There are people in their 60s that can follow apprentices. And although Richard and Cambridge Spark focus on AI and the data space, there are so many different disciplines you can do that. So I hope there was enough in there for you to think about around apprentices. As for this series, this actually is the 13th, believe it or not, episode of this series. We're going to wrap it up there, but there will be a follow-up series. So I'd really value any kind of feedback, any comments. What have you liked? Things that we could do differently. And if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode, then please do reach out and get in contact. So for now, goodbye, and thanks as always to you for listening.